Hey, what's up, everybody? This is your boy Kenny, and this is Unsung Season 12, and this is the season premiere, and this is the episode on Silk. Yo, I was a die-hard Silk fan growing up, as many of you who definitely grew up in the 90s, because, you know, the 90s had that real good R&B. You know, that R&B that will just, you know, really touch you deep, and definitely Silk was a part of that class of great R&B singers that really did music that really not only touched you deeply, but it really not only taught you how to get freaky, but it also taught you how to love. And how could you not know their biggest hit is, Freak Me. Like, I remember when that song came out, I think I was like around 10 or 11 years old. And I would hear it all the time. It was always on the radio. Can you imagine being in elementary school? You see a group of girls, let me lick you up and down, and I'm talking about like 3rd and 4th grade, and they are like literally getting into it. Like, that song was huge, and it was even just as huge when I was in high school, because then, you know, by the time I was in high school, that's when the album Tonight came out. I was around 16 when that album came out, and, you know, that was, you know, the album with It's You and Meeting in My Bedroom. I mean, that album was everything. So therefore, you know, from elementary school to high school, Silk was definitely a part of my life, and, you know, even as of now, these guys are still going strong. They're still vocal powerhouses, and they still shut it down like ever before. And this was the group that paved the way for groups like 112, Jagged Edge, and Next. You know, this was like the group that pretty much launched this new age of R&B male groups. You know, it's like, you know, they were the graduation from New Edition, because New Edition had it locked in the 80s. You know, Silk pretty much brought that new flair in the 90s, and many of them followed suit. So, to talk a little bit about the episode, you had, you know, Sonia Norwood. You know, shout out to Sonia. I'm a big Brandy fan. You know, Sonia was actually one of their former managers, and she was one of the commentators. Also, Chris Tucker, who actually knew them back in the day when they were in high school, you know, he also was a commentator, because, you know, they a good portion, most of them grew up in Atlanta, and Chris is from the ATL as well. I think Lil G, Gary, he was actually from Nashville originally. But yeah, it was just, and also 112, they were also commentators on this as well. And, you know, it's just, you know, amazing that that this group has literally stood the test of time. And they've definitely had their ups and downs as, you know, being a group in the 90s, you know, dealing with their label, you know, dealing with issues within the group, and then also issues with the label. So they really went through a lot, but they're survived. But they're pretty much pioneers, because they're still here to tell the story. Okay, so pretty much, you know, they all got their start in Atlanta, and they pretty much were singing in church. It was started by, you know, the members Jimmy Gates and Timothy Cameron, who's known as Timzo. Timzo, you can think, was definitely kind of like the bad boy of the group, but he was also the cool one. And they even mentioned that when they got old, you know, they grew up singing in church, but then he says once he got older, you know, they would, you know, he kind of like started to kind of get out into the streets and started smoking weed, and kind of got caught up, you know, with a drug bust. And, you know, his cousin, you know, because Jimmy and Timothy are cousins, and Jimmy ended up getting a job at McDonald's, and that's where he met, Jonathan Rasbo, John, he met him there. Albert Allen also worked there too. So they were all working at McDonald's, and Timzo eventually got out of jail because I think he had to serve 90 days. I could be wrong, but correct me in the comments if I am. But when Timzo got out of jail, they said Timzo was kind of like the wild one. He would come to McDonald's and would jump the counter and eat all the food. I was like, that boy is off the chain, and I was so here for it. Because it was like, it was so crazy because I can literally picture myself seeing him do that. Just the flair that he gives off. You just know that he's a real cool cat, but he'll definitely turn up if he needs to. He had the dark shades. I mean, he was giving realness all day, and I was so here for it. So I was definitely Timzo really was one of those guys in the group that stood out. And, they said that they would practice their harmonies. They had a McDonald's that was 2 stories, so they would, practice, after their shift, they would practice their routine. And they named themselves Silk because they had such smooth harmony that it just felt like silk. It just felt sexy. It felt soothing. It was relaxing. And they were all pretty much, church boys, so they were doing gospel, events as well as doing other events where they would do secular music. So they were pretty much doing both, but they were mainly known in the community as being the boys who sing gospel because they all grew up singing in church. And so pretty much what ends up happening is that they end up doing this talent show in high school. Chris Tucker is actually the host. And, Chris Tucker definitely is the type that will be roasting people, the acts and everything. So, so definitely he was kind of like the hype guy. So you just saw that all of their dreams were all, it's like they literally were they were all on the path to their journeys at this time in high school. Chris Tucker being a comedian, he's hosting, a talent show. I mean, that's the perfect lane for a comedian. And then having Silk perform as artists, they all were on the verge of becoming big stars at that time. So that was I thought that was rather interesting when they talked about that. And, of course, Chris is crazy. So Chris was having, a good time talking about them and, definitely imitating, the songs and all that. So, so it was cool, and then it was at that talent show that they met, Gary Glenn, Big G. He ends up joining the group. In 91, they actually meet the management team of Louise and Lonnie Ferguson. Louise actually was the road manager of Keith Sweat, and that's how Keith Sweat came into the picture. And Keith Sweat immediately fell in love with them. He said he loved their harmonies, but he said the thing that they were missing was that lead singer, because he started talking about, these groups that were out, they always had that one lead singer that was kind of like the focal point that brought everything together. So they needed that powerhouse singer. And they were working with Albert Allen, but they were having pitch issues with him. So eventually, he left the group, and then later on Tiger Graham, because I think he was having issues, and he ended up leaving the group. And then that's when they found Gary Jenkins, Little G. And now we know how much of a powerhouse god Little G is. That boy can sing his face off. Even now, his voice is just as crisp now as it was then. The boy can sing his face off. I remember when I saw him in Medea's family reunion, the play. He was definitely somebody that I was drawn to. Because I'm a singer too, so I definitely love great voices. And he is definitely one voice that I definitely studied. Just his range is phenomenal. And the fact that he's such a short guy, but he has such a big sound, it's like he comes from the same class of these powerhouse singers like Melba Moore and Stephanie Mills. These people who are small, but will sing and shut it down. Sing the house down. So, So for me, it's like he's a special quality, and he was exactly what they needed. And and he's from Nashville, as I mentioned, and they signed under, Keith Sweat's label, Kia. And the funny thing, he said that they were pretty much like little Keiths. Like, he kind of gave them, some of his swag, because Keith has always been known to be so swag and so smooth, and that's why the ladies love him. And he kind of brought that flair to Silk. And he said that, he kind of made them, younger versions of himself. And the funny thing about it is because he did the same with Cut Close, he just made them the female version of him. And, definitely it goes to show, like, how Keith, began to, he was a big star in his own right, but then now he was investing in new talent and kind of honing them to be big stars as well. And this was, one of his, big mainstream acts. So, so pretty much, they also had an issue, with the Fergusons, because it was kind of like a toss-up. Like, it was like either you go in with Keith Sweat or with us. They chose Keith. And then, so they early on started to have, issues when it came to management. That album, Lose Control, and actually I was 9. I said I was like 10 or 11. I was actually a little younger when that album came out. It came out in 92, and I remember the song Happy Days. I remember I used to hear that song, on the radio a lot too. But it was definitely a really big radio hit, but it really, and like it was also on, they also did a video too. So I definitely remember seeing the video on BET. So yeah, it was like they were kind of around when I was like a little boy growing up. So it was pretty cool, to kind of see this episode and see some of this played back, because I was kind of getting groovy. I was like, oh yeah, happy days are here. And I was just like literally jamming while I was watching this episode. Like, y'all had to see, y'all could have seen me, man. I was literally getting my life. And then also, definitely, Freak Me, baby. Oh, yeah. I was like, oh, shit, this shit takes me back. And I live for that song, and that is still like their signature song to this day. They cannot do any fucking show without doing Freak Me. And, Gary G even joked that, we're going to be 50 or 80-year-old men, and we still going to be singing Freak Me. Like, that is that song that's timeless, man, and that song is still relevant. And it went number 1 R&B, and it also went number 1 pop. So that was, that was what they would call, like, the breakthrough. And they broke through in a very big way. Ooh. There we go. Sorry, I got the notes on my phone, so the phone sometimes flicks off. It's crazy. And, like, they were actually nervous about the song coming out because they had this church following. They like, oh, my God, what my mama gonna think? Oh, God, grandma gonna beat my ass? Like, it was kind of those things going on in their mind. Like, man, we really crossing the line now. People gonna be singing about, because the song is about, sex and about getting freaky. Let me lick you up and down till you say stop. That was never on the radio before Silk. Silk was groundbreaking because they were explicit, or more, let's say, honest, than other singers before. Other singers before them would kind of allude around it. Silk said it. And another group that they paved the way for was H-Town. Another great phenomenal act. So Silk kind of paved the way for a lot of them. And and I remember as a kid growing up, I literally was just drawn to them. Definitely I was drawn to Gary because I'm a singer, so definitely Gary's voice just knocked me out. And yes, and John's voice was great too, so both of them I loved. But definitely, I was the one. Gary was like my favorite. I was just like, yes, Lil G, bring it home, do your thing, boy. You know, because I definitely because as I said, I'm a singer, so he was definitely that one person that I studied, and I was like, man, I want to be like that guy because that boy can sing the house down, and you know, and then they also talked about their other hits, you know, Girl, You're For Me, like that was like a damn good hit too. I love that one. And they talked about after that first album, they wanted to do more producing and writing on the second album. But Keith Sweat was like, nah, you know, we already got a formula going. Let me get this next one out the pocket to show that y'all still relevant. Y'all can still do it. And then on the third album, I can let you guys do that. But they wanted what they wanted. So eventually, you know, they severed ties with Keith Sweat, and they ended up leaving Kia Records, and they signed with Elektra, you know, with Sylvia Rowan, and they did their second album, but their second album wasn't as successful as the first one. I mean, even though they had some good songs on it, I mean, Hooked On was definitely my jam. I definitely used to love that song, you know. Living without you got me hooked on everything you do. I used to love that track. So yeah, so pretty much, you know, they signed, and you know, and the album went gold, but it wasn't as successful as the first album. And then they ran into one of the current problems that a lot of artists face in the music industry, the issue with the money. You know, they realized that they sold like 2 million albums, but other people made money, but they weren't getting the money. And they actually had to file for bankruptcy. And, you know, they were very, I mean, if anything, I can say I respect these men because they literally picked up and kept going. You know, that could have easily been the end-all be-all, and the group could have easily disbanded. But they chose to stick with it, and they say that, hey, you know, hey, we're broke, but now let's work on getting back to where we are. And, you know, they pretty much decided that, hey, we're going to come back, but we're going to come back the right way. So they took time off. They were touring in Europe, and that's where they ran into Sonia Norwood and Brandy. And Brandy at this time is a big pop star, and she's breaking out doing her thing, you know. So they've gotten close to her, and you know, they really see how Sonia, you know, was catering to her daughter and how she was being supportive, you know, of not only her daughter's career but her daughter's well-being. That they actually talked to her to becoming their manager. But she was kind of shocked because she said she really didn't have much experience, but she definitely decided to take them on. And they even said in this thing that they said if it wasn't for Sonia Norwood, Silk would not be here today. She saved us, and she gave us a second chance. You know, she pretty much, you know, was pretty much their saving grace. And they also talk about, you know, definitely they started working with Daryl D. Light Allenby, you know, the infamous, you know, producer who produced that track with Busta Rhymes and Janet Jackson. I'm like, ooh, that whole song was just a shit. So you know, D. Light was a beast, and with them, along with D. Light, match made in heaven, because that third album, and that album came out when I was 16. Tonight, man, that went number 13 on the Billboard 100. You know, and that song, one of my tracks off of that, If You, oh my God, yes. If you and I love me. Ooh, like, it just takes me out, you know. Like, I really love these guys, man, because it was like, wow, they were a part of my childhood. I literally grew up with them, and it's crazy. It's like, wow. Even as of now, I'm still in awe of these guys and in awe of their talent. But, you know, that song, you know, it had If You and Meeting in My Bedroom. You know, that was, I mean, that Billboard, that's why I said, like, by the time 1999, I was in high school. And the funny thing about it, I actually had a friend who, we were, like, in school, and she had, like, her CD Walkman. You know, yeah, this is the 90s, baby. She had a CD Walkman, and she was playing Silk, and she was singing Freak Me. And I was just like, it's crazy. That song was out when I was, like, 9 years old, and yeah, it's still popping, and I'm 16. You know, that just goes to show you that these men are true legends, and that they really have created a legacy in music altogether. And it was funny because even 112 even talked about, you know, I think it was Mike from 112. He was talking about there was this little baby that was crying, and the baby wouldn't stop crying. So he said his grandmother picked up the baby, and she was trying to get the baby to stop crying, but then she started singing, "Let me lift you up and down." That tickled the hell out of me, man. I was like, wow, that was so hilarious. And he was like, "Grandma, WTF, what you doing?" But the baby stopped crying, though. So, hey, Freak Me works for everybody, even babies. So I thought, I'm sorry, yo, but that gave me life. That gave me so much life. But yes, this was a great episode. Also, what ended up happening is that after that, Gary ended up going solo, and they kind of, it was a breach of contract, so they lost their contract with Elektra. They went independent, and they released 2 albums that didn't do so well. But yeah, Ebony Eyes, that remake, that was hot. Sung it down. But then eventually Keith Sweat kind of brought them back and, reunited them. And they've been still selling out tours, and they're still making music and releasing new material. And, they also, give to charity, as well as, they also have very big hearts. So they also talked about, from one of their latest albums, the song Reflections, that they actually donated the proceeds to a program for children. And you see all these children with these awards. I mean, that is amazing. Like, they're investing in, the future. And that definitely makes me love these guys even more. So that's what I have, y'all. If I missed anything, put it down in the comments. And tell me what you thought about this episode. I'm so glad Unsung is back. I'm a big music fan, and I'm just so glad that this show is back, and I get to talk about some of these amazing artists that have captured our hearts and our souls. So that's what I have. So subscribe to my channel. Click that bell so you get notifications every time I drop a video. Also, follow me on all of my social platforms. I have them listed in the description box. Also, like this video, comment on this video, and share this video. And I will be back with the next episode of Unsung. So until next time, everybody, take care.